All right. So, as you guys know, many of the Japanese in World War II fled Japan, and a lot of them have migrated to Brazil. Now, as a result, the Japanese were able to bring their martial arts culture that rippled a future effect in Brazilian mixed martial arts. Alex Pereira and Gilbert Burns are great contrasting examples of that. And what do I mean by that? A high level striker in Alex Pereira, double champion in Glory Kickboxing, and a world class jiu jitsu grappler in Gilbert Burns. These two contrasting styles have a huge part in Brazilian history alone. For one, many Brazilians that come from a privileged background, not so far fetched from today, considering how expensive jiu jitsu gears are and the gis, along with the monthly costs of paying for dojos, well, these privileged Brazilians would often go to the Rio beaches and pick fights with the less fortunate kids of the favelas. Very much the opposite aspect of the United States, where crime can sometimes consist of kids from, let's say, Compton or Long Beach robbing kids in Beverly Hills, along with the contrasting nature of poor kids in California who would often live in places downhill in the streets of Compton and Long Beach and Watts and all that, as opposed to the posh and rich parts of the Hollywood Hills, where you obviously have to go uphill to go see these people. In Brazil, it's the consistent. It's consistent that in the favelas of the ghettos, as translated in Portuguese, are often placed in the highest hills of the Brazilian urban environment, whereas the rich in Brazil are often placed in downhill sections with gated communities and extra security surrounding their affluent neighborhoods. Now, let's give some modern context to understand this story. In 2010, the first time the UFC came to Abu Dhabi, and the first time Frankie Edgar won his 155 championship belt against MMA legend BJ Penn, and by the way, that same card was headlined by two Brazilians of two contrasting cultures. None other than Damian Maia, multiple-time world jiu-jitsu champion, similar to Gilbert Burns, taking on the legend, who, by the way, was just currently inducted into the UFC Hall of Fame, Anderson Silva, taking him on for the 185-pound championship, which is going to be contested this weekend by that same lineage. Now, by Adesanya versus Alex Pereira, okay, who remembers this showdown in 2010? Okay, I'm talking about with Anderson Silva and Damian Maia. Dana White was extremely upset that Anderson Silva chose to play with Damian Maia by taunting him instead of finishing him early, Mike Tyson style, in a way that Dana White had referenced Mike Tyson in that degree. Now, during this fight, Anderson Silva called Damian Maia a playboy, and in no reference to Hugh Hefner or anybody with promiscuity in any kind of way, but yet a Brazilian slang for what you would call privileged European Portuguese descendant people. Therefore, it was common for rich Brazilians to once again bring up their kids in the jiu-jitsu system, given how expensive it can be. And also taking into consideration that Damian Maia probably came from a privileged family, and not only that, went on to become a world multiple jiu-jitsu champion in the same similar fashion as Gilbert Burns. So, whereas in Brazil, in the favelas and in the jungle, where a lot of these kids grow up, they usually first learn striking, as in Muay Thai or boxing, because of the accessibilities that are within that country. Now, even in the United States, across the Western world, and across Europe, it seems that boxing and Muay Thai seem to be a less expensive sport to invest for your kids in. Not a lot of gear that's really expensive. The boxing gloves cost this much, a mouth guard. That's all you really need. In comparison to jiu-jitsu, they have outrageous amounts of fees that you have to pay monthly just to be part of a dojo. But nonetheless, these boxing cultures, especially in the West, have an access to, let's say, charities and government programs. And by the way, speaking of Mike Tyson, people often forget that the Police Gazette Gym in upstate New York is where Mike Tyson has gotten his start from in boxing, as a way to keep troubled youths off the streets and into the ring. So this is literally the legacy of Brazilian martial arts as it pertains to Alex Pereira and Gilbert Burns. A lot of people forget that Lyoto Machida's father had fled Japan during World War II, and then he came to Brazil and taught his style of karate to the Brazilians there. Many of the Brazilians took on the Japanese from that part of the world, and then the Japanese came in here and brought their art, which stemmed from ninjutsu, that brought judo, that also brought jiu-jitsu. And on top of bringing jiu-jitsu, the Brazilians, being that they live in such a violent society, were able to implement that and modify that particular jiu-jitsu style, and that is why you have the style that you call today Brazilian jiu-jitsu, who, by the way, was perfected by the Gracie family. And who is a Gracie family? Well, if you're a longtime MMA fan, you know who Royce Gracie is. You know his brother, what's that guy's name from Choke? Orion Gracie, you know, Hickson Gracie, and so on and so forth. And now they have a new younger generation of people that teach around the world that stems from London, from California, all the way to New York. And then even have these affiliations with the royal family of the UAE. And then on top of that, they teach police and local law enforcement in the United States jiu-jitsu, as what you see with the relationship the Gracies have with the LAPD in Los Angeles. But nonetheless, this is the legacy of Brazilian martial arts as its contribution to the world. Now, there was a time in mixed martial arts where there was only 3 types of people that competed in this. They were either American, Brazilian, and Japanese, and that was it. Nowadays, you have an interesting contrasting aspect of that, of different casts of people from around the world, just like Israel Adesanya, who's featured in this card. A guy who comes from Nigeria. His family was going to migrate to the United States, but since 9/11 happened, they scratched that and moved to New Zealand instead, which gave Izzy a different type of marketability in that aspect. And then on top of that, the guy is hip-hop centric, seems like the type of guy that grew up in the Bronx or New York, in the mecca of hip-hop in that sense. But nonetheless, an interesting figure to the entire world with the different characters that MMA has brought with Conor McGregor. Who would have ever imagined that you'd have an Irish guy in the UFC, let alone become one of the most famous people in the world? Now you have Russians because of the travel restrictions that were uplifted or taken away over the years, and now they're able to travel all around the world. Maybe not so much now because of what happened with Ukraine, but nonetheless, in between that, that is the contribution of Brazil's martial arts to the world. Now, moving on to the card, this is what we're going to have going on, right? You have Jacqueline Almarion, a prospect, ATT stable, all first-round finishes, someone to look out for, right? Very similar to Ronda Rousey when she was finishing people with arm bars in the first round. And by the way, this is the women's strawweight division, and that's not something usual that you'd usually see a lot of finishes in. So I'm going to go with Jacqueline Almarion in this one for perhaps maybe a first-round submission. Now, Sam Hughes can give some problems with the pace that she has, but once again, there's levels to this, and there's a reason why Jacqueline is performing at the rate that she's at, being able to score first-round submissions. Now, moving on to the card, we have Sha Yilan will go and have a decision against Steve Garcia. I think he's just a lot more athletic than Steve Garcia. By the looks of it, Steve Garcia just looks a lot softer than Sha Yilan. Make of that as you will. I can see him grinding him out for 3 rounds. He seems to have the quicker hands in Garcia. Steve is coming off of a KO, but the athleticism of Sha will play a major factor here. Sha will have better grappling, and that alone will be the game changer. Now, moving on to the card, we have Ignacio taking on Trey Ognon. I'm going to go with Ignacio in this one based on his improvements that he's had with every fight consistently. He's going to have a 29-28 decision in this one. He's 6'3" at the lightweight division. He's going to use his reach, which I think is going to be a factor in the striking. So Ignacio by decision on this one. Moving on to the card, you have Cynthia Calvillo taking on Lupita. This is going to be a close fight. I'm going to go with Lupita to win a decision by this one. Lupita's on her way up, and Cynthia at 35 years old just on her way down. Moving on to the card, you have GM3 taking on Joe Pfeiffer. Now, it seems like GM3 is consistently used to test these upcoming prospects, and Joe is right on that same trajectory at the 185 division with, let's say, Khamzat and Bo Nickel. Joe could ragdoll GM3 here. GM3 trains with Bilal Muhammad. Can be a really good fight, considering that Joe also trained with Sean Brady. Now, Joe's grappling is going to surprise a lot of people here, even though GM3 has had one of the highest submission rates at 185. I think Joe's going to finish him in a second round with TKO, possibly a ground and pound. Now, moving on, we have Carl Williams taking on Chase Sherman. Former BKFC vet, by the way. But I'm going to go with Carl on this one, and he's going to out-grapple Chase Sherman. Now, Chris Barnett was supposed to be in this fight, but was pulled out. Now, Carl took it on a short notice, and the reason why I think Carl took this on a short notice is I think he sees a grappling deficiency in Chase Sherman, and this is the reason why he took it on an early day's notice. I think I'm going to see Carl by first round ground and pound finish on this one. Now you got Watterson taking on Luana. Watterson, I'm going to go with a decision on this one, even though she's the underdog. She's had many close split decision losses, but that can be deceiving considering she's taken on Luana, who's a 10-1 record opponent. Experience and creative striking will win this one for Watterson Gomez. She's got good karate and will use her range. So I'm going to see Watterson by decision in this one, and I don't see a finish, but I see a technical affair on her part. And also, interesting about Watterson, right? She's half Thai and half American. And why I find that interesting is she's a karate fighter. She grew up training in karate. Now, usually, a lot of the Thais that I've trained with over the years, a lot of the Laos, Thais, Cambodians that I've trained with over the years, they usually look at karate and taekwondo as this wimpy sport of some sort. So it's very surprising that Watterson was able to take on this art of karate instead of Muay Thai in that aspect. So once again, even though she's the underdog in this one, her experience alone is just going to win this by decision. Moving on to the card, you got the return of Kelvin Gastelum taking on Chris Curtis. Another underdog here, just like Watterson, who's also a veteran, Kelvin Gastelum. He's taken so much damage in his career with the championship fights that he's had with Izzy and things of that nature. You got to wonder how much of that damage will affect him. Now, Curtis has never had a chance to fight in the top, even though both of them have started in the same year of their pro career back in 2009. I can't see Curtis getting KO'd, so maybe I can see Curtis winning this one by decision, possibly a body shot, but at the same time, don't be surprised if Kelvin Gastelum's footwork is going to be the difference in being able to win this fight by a decision as well. So we move on to the main card. You have 18-year-old Raul Rojas taking on Christian Rodriguez. I'm going to go with Raul on this one just based on the fact that, yes, he is the favorite prospect in this one, the guy that everybody is hyping up, but he's going to have a hard fight in his hands against Rodriguez because Rodriguez has great awareness of danger and has showed that against Jonathan Pierce in their fight. But Rojas is red hot right now and will take a decision on this one. Raul will have better positions and transitions and potentially keep him on his back, but he will use his youthful energy to keep that pace high, similar to the way that Khamzat fought Gilbert Burns, but will probably slow down in the end, which is why I say that this is going to be a hard fight for Rojas. We will see an improved striking out of Rojas, but ultimately Rojas's grappling is going to win this one by decision. Next one coming up, Kevin Holland taking on Santiago Ponzinibbio. Now, Holland got into a little scuffle, not so much of a scuffle, more like a little shouting match at the hotel against Jorge Masvidal. Could we see this down the road? Because let's say if Jorge Masvidal loses this fight this weekend, could that be a fight that Kevin Holland can take on somewhere down the future? Or what if both of them win this fight in the same card? I'm talking about Jorge Masvidal and Holland. If they both win it, okay, is that a potential fight that can happen somewhere down the road? I mean, look, you can't just go out and have these little shouting matches at the hotels and then not fight later on, right? Who knows? Nonetheless, I got Holland on this one. Now, don't let the Khamzat fight fool you because he got finished by Khamzat. Santiago does get dropped a lot, and Holland can be a very technical striker if he's not in there with young, explosive fighters like Khamzat. Santiago is a little bit older, slower, just has been taking a lot of damage, and it's Holland's taking at that. Alex Morono took Santiago at a short notice, and this is Holland at a full camp mode. So, second round KO, followed by a ground and pound finish, followed by a submission by Kevin Holland. With Font versus Adrian Yanez, I'm going to go with Adrian Yanez on this one. I just think that Font is just a little bit older right now. Yanez is hot in his streak, and I think that's going to follow up in this fight. So I'd go with Yanez on this one. Now, going on with Burns versus Masvidal. We all know Masvidal is a high-level striker. Granted, Burns is a high-level grappler. But Burns has an improved striking. However, his striking is a little bit less than Jorge Masvidal, but not too far away. So what does that tell you? Aside from all the superstardom, the hype that's behind the hype that's behind Jorge Masvidal, the fact that he had a court case going on, you got to wonder how much of that is he focused into this fight. And then last week, he was promoting his boxing promotion where Roy Jones Jr. took on Anthony Pettis. I'm going to go with Gilbert Burns on this one. He's a full-time fighter. He's all in. Jorge Masvidal is talking about how he wants to retire after this fight. That's not a good sign for me. It's a red flag. His foot is 1 foot out the door and 1 foot in. It's usually not a good thing that you want out of an MMA fighter or any combat athlete. Whereas you have Gilbert Burns, he's all in. He's now started a new diet where he doesn't take any sugar in at all. He's been doing cold plunges, doing all these different things to improve himself. On top of that, before he was even doing any of that, he was already a world-class jiu-jitsu champion on top of being a top contender in the welterweight division. So I think the hardcores are going to agree that Gilbert Burns is going to win this one, even though if you're a casual and you're a guy like Drake who likes to put it on a lot of the famous fan favorite fighters, you got to understand, even though the UFC bought WWE, this is not WWE, and the fan favorite doesn't always win. So Gilbert Burns on this one. Now moving on to the main event of the evening. I think we're going to have to go with Alex Pereira on this one. Why? Because Alex Pereira just seems to have his number. Now, you got to understand, in the last fights, Israel Adesanya was able to outpoint him. He was able to win the rounds. But ultimately, Alex Pereira just has this strength about him, this natural ability of being able to knock you out at any given notice. So even though Israel Adesanya is a much more technical fighter, it just seems like Alex Pereira is coming into this 20% better. And also, you got to take into consideration, Dana White referenced about Leon Edwards going into the Usman trilogy in London, that when you become a champion, you're 20% better. So even though Izzy had the better wrestling in the last fight, which, by the way, was not an element that was present within their kickboxing fights, I think that Alex Pereira may come in here with a much more preparation to his grappling to counter that. And there's always this meme where after Israel Adesanya lost to Pereira, where Alex Pereira follows Israel Adesanya everywhere he goes. Let's say Israel Adesanya retires from MMA, goes into golf. Alex Pereira comes in there, follows up, becomes a golf champion and beats him. Israel Adesanya goes into playing cornhole, and then he becomes a cornhole champion. Now Alex Pereira comes in and becomes a cornhole champion to beat him in that. He comes in and plays basketball. Alex Pereira comes in and plays basketball and dunks him. You know those memes that I'm talking about. So I think that that meme is going to come to life when Alex Pereira may surprise a lot of people with the improved wrestling that he's going to have going on in this fight. But once again, I just think that with the fights that we've seen in kickboxing, Alex Pereira going 3-0 against Israel Adesanya, and now he's 1-0 against Izzy in MMA and could potentially go 2-0. I think that is playing in the back of the mind of Israel Adesanya. Plus, you got to understand, Israel Adesanya is in a superstardom right now where he has a lot of fans that coddle him. He's got a lot of fans that tell him he's great and this and that. At the same time, he's got a great camp behind him where these guys don't give him any sugarcoating in terms of how Eugene Berman teaches his guys, how he trains his guys. You've seen that with Volk and all these other guys that fight in that camp as well, with Kai Kara France, with Carlos Ulberg, with Blood Diamond. And the list goes on. Brad Riddell, all these guys. But nonetheless, it's just one of these cases where just certain guys just have your number, and I just don't see Alex Pereira not having his number in any way. I can see Alex Pereira winning a decision in this one, if not some early stoppage later on. But once again, you never know. That's why they call it the theater of the unknown. And all we can do is enjoy the fights, because it is UFC 287 Miami coming up this week. What a great time to be a fight fan. Enjoy it.